She cooked his favorite meal the night she decided everything had to end. One woman, one dinner table, and a secret she had been carrying for 3 years. What happened that night changed everything for him, for her, and for everyone who thought they knew the whole story. This is a story about silence, survival, and the moment one woman stopped shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's world. Stay with it, because the ending will stay with you. Chapter 1. The table was always set for two. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary. Nadia moved through it the way she always did, quietly, precisely, like a woman who had learned that taking up too much space had consequences. The pan sizzled, the timer hummed. Outside the window, the Atlanta sky was burning orange at the edges, the sun dragging itself down behind the skyline like it was tired of watching. She stirred the sauce without looking at it. Her eyes were somewhere else. On the dining table, 2 plates were already arranged, crystal glasses, folded napkins, a single candle in the center, the expensive kind Raymond had bought on their honeymoon in Florence, the kind she was never allowed to light without his permission. Tonight, she had lit it herself. That small act felt enormous. Raymond Ashford was a man who commanded rooms. He was the kind of man people described before they even said his name. That man, you know, the one, sharp suit, sharper tongue. He ran a private equity firm that had quietly devoured 4 smaller companies in 2 years. His colleagues admired him, his employees feared him. His wife had learned to read the temperature of his moods the way a sailor reads the wind, not for pleasure, but for survival. They had been married for 6 years. For the first 2, Nadia had believed she was loved. She placed the lamb chops onto the serving plate and carried it to the table. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She had imagined this moment for months, had rehearsed it in the bathroom mirror at a.m. while Raymond slept, and she had always imagined her hands shaking. They were not shaking. The front door opened at exactly 7:14 p.m. Raymond was always on time. Punctuality was one of his many forms of control. Something smells good. His voice came before his face did. Smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who had spent years perfecting how he entered a room. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, tall, pressed, a loosened tie the only concession to the end of his day. His eyes swept the table and something shifted in them, brief, almost imperceptible, a flicker of surprise that he quickly folded away. You cooked, he said. I cooked, Nadia replied. He sat down across from her and reached for the wine. He poured his glass first. He always did. Long day? She asked. Aren't they all? She watched him cut into the lamb, watched him chew, watched him reach for his phone out of habit, then set it face down when he caught her looking. A small gesture, a rare one. It almost made her waver. Almost. Because Nadia had found the messages 3 weeks ago, and what was in them wasn't just betrayal. It was so much worse than that. Chapter 2. The man behind the myth. Raymond Ashford had not always been this way. That was the part Nadia could never fully let go of, the memory of who he was before the money got bigger and the patience got smaller. She had met him at a charity gala in 2018, back when he was still climbing, still hungry in a way that looked like ambition rather than appetite. He had knocked up to her with a glass of champagne and a question nobody at those events ever asked. Do you actually enjoy these things? Or are you just very good at pretending? She had laughed, a real one, the kind that catches you off guard. They talked for 3 hours that night, about her graphic design career, about his childhood in rural Georgia, detail he rarely shared publicly, about the gap between the lives people performed and the lives they actually lived. He had seemed then like a man who understood that gap. She understood now that he had simply been studying it. Across the table, Raymond refilled his wine and began talking about a deal his firm was closing, something about a logistics company in Charlotte. Nadia nodded at the right moments. She had become fluent in this, the language of listening without hearing, of being present without being there. Marcus thinks we should wait until Q2, Raymond said, cutting another piece of lamb. But Marcus has always been a coward dressed in a consultant's clothes. Nadia looked at him. He's been with you for years. Loyalty without instinct is just furniture. She said nothing. This was another thing she had learned, when to go quiet. Raymond didn't want responses. He wanted an audience, there was a difference, and early in the marriage she had made the mistake of not knowing it. The first time she had challenged him in public, he had smiled at her the entire drive home, not said a word, just smiled. And when they got inside, he had sat across from her in the living room and explained, in a voice softer than silence, exactly how embarrassing she had been. She had apologized. She still felt sick about that. "You're quiet tonight," Raymond said, looking up from his plate. "Just tired." He studied her for a moment. Raymond had an unsettling ability to read rooms. It was part of what made him dangerous in business and at home. His eyes moved across her face the way a hand moves across a wall in the dark, looking for a light switch. "The Henderson account is signing tomorrow," he said, returning to his food. "We should celebrate this weekend, dinner at Bacchanalia, invite the Wrights." "Sure," she said. The candle between them flickered. Outside, a car passed, music drifting from its open windows, something slow and far away, like a song from a life she hadn't lived yet. Raymond's phone buzzed against the table. He didn't reach for it immediately, but Nadia noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers moved 1 inch toward it, then stopped. A small, involuntary thing, the kind of thing a careful man tries to control and almost does. Almost, because Nadia already knew who was on the other end of that phone. And tonight, so did someone else. Chapter 3. What the emails already knew. 3 weeks earlier, it had been a Tuesday. Nadia remembered that detail clearly, not because Tuesdays meant anything, but because she had always believed that life-altering moments deserved dramatic settings, storms, midnight, some kind of signal from the universe that everything was about to shift. Instead, it had been an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, pale light through the home office window, a cup of tea going cold on the desk, Raymond at a conference in Boston. She had gone into his office to find the insurance documents their accountant had requested. That was all, a simple errand in a quiet house. His laptop was open. She hadn't meant to look, that part was true. His email was pulled up. He had been on a call before he left and hadn't closed anything. Her eyes caught her own name in the subject line, and her hand moved to the trackpad before her brain gave it permission. The email thread was between Raymond and a woman named Celeste Vaughan. Nadia had heard that name once, a property developer Raymond had mentioned in passing, someone peripheral, someone unimportant. She read the first email, then the second, then she sat down on the floor of his office without meaning to, because her legs had simply stopped working. It wasn't the affair that broke something in her. She had suspected that for over a year, had filed it somewhere dark and quiet in herself, the way people file things they are not yet ready to face. It was the other part, buried in the thread between the soft language of two people hiding something and the cold arithmetic of what they were planning, was a document, an attachment. She opened it with shaking hands. It was a transfer agreement. Raymond was moving assets. Quietly. Systematically. A beach property in the Cayman Islands she had never been told about. A holding company registered in Delaware under a name she didn't recognize. Funds being redirected through accounts that existed outside their marriage, outside their shared life, outside anything she had ever been allowed to see. He was building an exit, had been building it, the dates suggested, for nearly 18 months. She sat on that floor for a long time. When she finally stood up, something had rearranged itself inside her. She couldn't name it then. She could only feel it, a cold, clarifying stillness that moved in where the pain had been. She closed the laptop, straightened the chair, walked out of the office. And she told no one, not her sister, not her closest friend Dara, who had never trusted Raymond and would have said "I told you so" with tears in her eyes. Nobody. Instead, Nadia had made a phone call that same evening to a woman named Gloria Chen, the sharpest divorce attorney in Atlanta, a woman known for dismantling powerful men with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. "Don't move anything," Gloria had told her. "Don't confront him. Don't change your behavior. Not yet." "How long?" Nadia had asked. "Until we have everything." Back at the dinner table, Raymond's phone buzzed a second time. This time, He picked it up. His face gave nothing away, but Nadia watched his thumb move across the screen in a single swipe, dismissing it, and she recognized that gesture. It was the gesture of a man silencing someone who expected more than silence. "Work?" she asked. "Always," he said. He smiled at her across the candlelight. She smiled back. And somewhere across the city, Gloria Chen was sitting in her office, and a process server was reading a document for the final time before morning. Chapter 4: Everything he built on borrowed ground. The dinner plates were cleared by 8 o'clock. Raymond moved to the living room the way he always did after dinner, loosening his cufflinks, dropping into the leather armchair that he had once described, without irony, as the only place in the world where he fully relaxed. He reached for the remote. The television filled the room with low noise. Nadia washed the dishes by hand. She could have used the dishwasher. They had an expensive one. Raymond had chosen it, along with everything else in the kitchen, during the renovation 3 years ago. But she washed the dishes by hand, because it gave her something to do with her body while her mind stayed sharp and moving. She thought about the calls she had made that morning. Gloria had been precise as always. Everything is in place. The documentation is complete. The forensic accountant finished his review yesterday. A pause. Then Nadia, what he has been doing is not just infidelity. It crosses into financial fraud. You understand what that means. She understood. Raymond hadn't just been hiding money from her. He had been hiding it from his business partners too. The forensic accountant Gloria had hired a quiet, meticulous man named Paulo Say had spent 6 weeks tracing the architecture of Raymond's finances. What he found was not the clean wrongdoing of a man simply protecting assets in a divorce. It was something older and more elaborate. Raymond had been siphoning funds from the firm's operating accounts since the 2nd year of their marriage, diverting small percentages through a cascade of shell companies, accumulating quietly, invisibly, in accounts that existed entirely off the record. His partners had no idea. Neither had Nadia, until Paulo Say laid it out in a document that read like a confession Raymond had never meant to give. She dried the last plate and set it on the rack. In the living room, Raymond laughed at something on the television. A real laugh, loose and unguarded, the kind he almost never produced anymore. She stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him for a moment. There was a version of her, the version from 4 years ago, maybe even 2, who would have felt something warm at the sight of him relaxed like that. Who would have carried 2 glasses of wine in from the kitchen and folded herself onto the couch beside him and believed, for the length of an evening, that everything was navigable. That version of her was gone. "Come sit," he said, without looking away from the screen. She walked into the room and sat on the far end of the couch, not close enough to touch. He didn't notice, or he noticed and chose not to acknowledge it. With Raymond, those 2 things had always been interchangeable. "I was thinking," he said, still watching the television, "we should look at that house in Buckhead. The one Darren mentioned. Good investment." "Another property," Nadia said. "It's how wealth compounds. You know that." She looked at the side of his face, the strong jaw, the careful posture even at rest, the man who had built an empire on a foundation of other people's trust, his partners, his colleagues, his wives, and had been quietly excavating that foundation for years. "You work so hard," she said. He glanced at her then. Something almost tender crossed his face. "It's all for us," he said. The words landed in the room and just sat there. Nadia nodded slowly. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She already knew what it said. She had been waiting for it all evening, the message from Gloria that would mean the machinery they had built together over 3 careful weeks had finally, irreversibly, been set into motion. She did not take the phone out. Not yet. Because Raymond was still smiling at her. And she wanted to remember this the last moment he would ever look at her like she was someone he had fooled. Tomorrow morning, his partners would receive a package. Tonight, he didn't know that yet. But the clock had already started. Chapter 5: The name she was never supposed to find. The television stayed on, but nobody was watching it anymore. Raymond had fallen into his phone emails, messages, the endless scroll of a man whose empire required constant feeding. Nadia sat at the opposite end of the couch with a book open in her lap that she had not read a single word of. She was thinking about Celeste Vaughan, not with jealousy. That particular wound had already closed itself, replaced by something harder and more useful. She was thinking about Celeste the way a chess player thinks about a piece on the board, what role she played, what she knew, how much of Raymond's architecture she had been allowed to see. The answer, it turned out, was almost all of it. Paulo Say had discovered something in the fourth week of his investigation that had stopped even Gloria mid-sentence when he reported it. Celeste Vaughan was not simply Raymond's affair, she was a co-signatory on two of the shell companies. Her property development firm had been used as a channel for three of the largest transfers. She had not been seduced into this arrangement. She had helped design it. Nadia had sat with that information for 5 days before she fully processed what it meant. Raymond had not simply found comfort in another woman while quietly dismantling his marriage. He had found a business partner. Someone equally calculating, someone who looked at Raymond Ashford and saw not a man to love but a structure to inhabit. In a strange, airless way, Nadia almost respected it. Almost. "I'm going to head up," she said, closing the book. Raymond looked up briefly. "I'll be up in an hour." She nodded and climbed the stairs. In the bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed and finally took her phone from her pocket. Gloria's message was 3 words. "It's all confirmed." Nadia exhaled slowly. She typed back 2 words. "Thank you, Gloria." Then she set the phone face down on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling. What she had not told Gloria, what she had not told anyone, was that Celeste Vaughan had made a mistake 4 days ago, a significant one. Celeste had contacted Nadia directly, through a private Instagram account that had no photo and no followers, with a message that was carefully worded but unmistakable in its meaning. "You should take what he's offering and walk away quietly. Some situations are bigger than one person's feelings." Nadia had read it 3 times. Then she had screenshotted it, forwarded it to Gloria, and never responded. But the message told her something critical. Celeste knew that Nadia knew, which meant Raymond knew too, or would know soon. Which meant the timeline had just compressed in a way that changed everything. She heard his footsteps on the stairs earlier than expected. The bedroom door opened. Raymond stood in the doorway and looked at her, and this time, the temperature in his eyes was different. The careful warmth from dinner was gone. What replaced it was something she recognized from the early years. That assessing look. The one that meant he was recalibrating. "You've been quiet all evening," he said. "I told you, tired." He walked to his side of the bed, sat down. The mattress shifted with his weight. "Nadia." Her name in his mouth, slow, deliberate, like a key turning in a lock. "Is there something you want to say to me?" She looked at him across the bed they had shared for 6 years. The candle downstairs had burned itself out by now. "No," she said, "not tonight." He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he reached over and turned off the lamp. But in the darkness, she heard his breathing faster than usual, shallow, controlled, the breathing of a man who was no longer certain of the ground beneath him. And she realized, with a stillness that felt almost like peace, that he already knew something was coming. He just didn't know how much she had. Chapter 6. The morning everything stopped pretending. Nadia was already dressed when Raymond came downstairs. This was unusual. On most mornings she moved slowly through the house, coffee first, then the quiet ritual of getting ready while Raymond showered and took his calls and filled every room with the ambient noise of his importance. She was always the one still buttoning her jacket when he reached for his keys. Not this morning. She was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee in hand and her coat already on when he appeared in the doorway. He was freshly showered, tie not yet knotted, phone in hand. He stopped when he saw her. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He moved to the coffee machine. His back was to her. She watched a set of his shoulders, that particular tension she had spent years learning to read. He was performing casualness, doing it well, but performing it nonetheless. "I have a 7 o'clock call with the Singapore office," he said. "I know. You mentioned it." He turned with his coffee and leaned against the counter, looked at her with that steady, measuring gaze. "You look different," he said. "Do I?" "Something about you this morning." He tilted his head slightly. "You seem..." He searched for the words. "Settled." She said nothing. Raymond's phone lit up on the counter beside him. He glanced down and his expression shifted, microscopic, barely visible. But Nadia caught it the way she always caught things now, a tightening around the eyes. a stillness that was not calm. He picked up the phone, read whatever was on the screen, set it back down. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine." Too fast. He reached for his tie and began knotting it, his fingers moving through the familiar routine while his mind was clearly somewhere else entirely. Nadia watched him work through it, watched the moment his composure began to develop hairline fractures too small for anyone else to notice. His phone lit up again. This time he didn't pick it up. Nadia stood, rinsed her coffee cup, and set it in the drying rack. She picked up her bag from the chair. "I have a meeting this morning," she said. "On a Saturday? New client." She moved toward the hallway. "I might be late." She was at the front door when he spoke again. "Nadia." She turned. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, coffee in one hand, phone now gripped in the other, tie half knotted. For just a moment, the architecture of Raymond Ashford came apart slightly. The sharpness left his eyes and something raw moved in underneath, something that looked, briefly and unexpectedly, like fear. "We should talk," he said. "Tonight. There are things I want to explain to you." She looked at him for a long moment. 6 years. Thousands of mornings. A version of herself she had slowly surrendered, one quiet compromise at a time. "I know," she said simply. Then she opened the front door and walked out into the cool morning air. 2 blocks away, Gloria Chen's car was idling at the curb exactly where she said it would be. Nadia climbed in. The door closed behind her. "His partners received everything at 6 this morning," Gloria said, pulling into traffic. "All 4 of them. The documentation, the forensic report, the transfer records." And Nadia asked. Gloria glanced at her sideways. "Marcus Hale called the firm's attorney at 6:17. A pause. "Raymond's access to the operating accounts was suspended at 6:42. Nadia looked out the window at the city moving past. Somewhere across Atlanta, Raymond Ashford was standing in his kitchen watching his phone light up with calls he had no good answers for. The empire had taken years to build. It had taken one morning to begin falling. But what neither Nadia nor Gloria knew yet, what was waiting for them inside the attorney's office, would change the shape of everything that came next. Chapter 7: The Document That Rewrote Everything. Gloria's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in Midtown. It was the kind of office that said everything without saying anything. Clean lines, no clutter, a single orchid on the reception desk that looked like it had never considered wilting, the kind of space designed to make powerful people feel that power was being handled correctly. Nadia had been here twice before. Both times she had sat across from Gloria and absorbed information in careful, measured doses. Both times she had left feeling like someone slowly learning the dimensions of a room she had been locked inside for years. This morning felt different. Gloria's assistant, a young woman named Priya who moved with quiet urgency, met them at the elevator and walked them directly to the conference room without the usual pleasantries. That alone told Nadia something. Gloria closed the door behind them. "Sit down," she said, not unkindly, but with the gravity of someone carrying weight they needed to set on a table. Nadia sat. Gloria opened a manila folder and slid a single document across the surface. Nadia looked down at it. It took her 12 seconds to understand what she was reading. Then she looked up. "When did this happen?" she asked. "It was filed 12 days ago," Gloria said. "We only found it this morning during the final title search. Raymond moved faster than we anticipated on one piece." The document was a deed transfer. Their house, the Buckhead property they had purchased together 4 years ago, the one Nadia had designed and furnished and filled with the careful architecture of what she had believed was a shared life, had been transferred into a trust. Not a joint trust. A trust registered solely in the name of a holding company that existed in Delaware under a name Nadia had never seen before last month. Raymond had transferred their home out of her name 17 days after she had sat on his office floor reading Celeste's emails. The timeline was not a coincidence. He knew, Nadia said. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. "He knew I had found something." "It appears so," Gloria said carefully. "The question now is whether Celeste warned him or whether he noticed something himself." Nadia thought about the darkened bedroom, his breathing, the way he had said her name across the breakfast table that morning, like a door he was trying to open before it locked. "Both," she said quietly. I think it was both. Gloria nodded. She pulled the folder back and opened it to a second page. Here is what matters right now. The transfer is fraudulent under Georgia marital asset law. We can have it reversed. It will take time, but the legal ground is solid. She paused. However, there is something else. Nadia waited. Paul found a second set of accounts this morning. Ones he hadn't traced before, smaller, older. Going back almost to the beginning of your marriage. Gloria's voice was measured, but her eyes were direct. Nadia, Raymond began moving money within 8 months of your wedding. The room went very quiet. 8 months. She had believed, in her most painful moments of retrospect, that Raymond had changed, that the man she married had slowly become someone else under the pressure of success and greed, that there had been a real version of him once. 8 months. That belief collapsed now, quietly and completely, like a structure that had never had a real foundation to begin with. He married me knowing, she said. It was not a question. Gloria didn't look away. That is what the evidence suggests. Nadia sat with that for a long moment. The orchid on the windowsill, the city outside, the low hum of the building breathing around her. Then something unexpected happened. She felt, beneath the devastation, something she had not anticipated. Relief. Because if Raymond had never been the man she thought he was, then the woman she had been shrinking herself to fit beside had never been the right size for the life she actually deserved. She straightened in her chair. What do we do next? She asked. Gloria allowed herself the smallest smile. We make sure he has nowhere left to go. But before either of them could say another word, Priya knocked twice and opened the conference room door. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice careful. There's someone downstairs who says she needs to speak with Mrs. Ashford. A pause. She says her name is Celeste Vaughan. Chapter 8. The Woman Who Came to Confess. Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Then Gloria looked at Nadia with the steady, unreadable expression of a woman who had spent 20 years watching powerful situations detonate in conference rooms. You don't have to see her, Gloria said. I know, Nadia replied. A beat of silence. Send her up, Nadia said to Priya. Priya nodded and disappeared. Gloria closed the folder on the table and folded her hands on top of it. Neither woman spoke while they waited. The city hummed 14 floors below, somewhere down the corridor. A phone rang twice and stopped. The conference room door opened. Celeste Vaughan was not what Nadia had imagined. She had constructed a version of this woman in her mind over 3 weeks, assembled from fragments of email language and financial documents and the cold arithmetic of betrayal. She had expected someone polished, weaponized, the kind of woman who moved through rooms like a statement. Instead, Celeste walked in looking like someone who had not slept in 2 days. She was tall, well-dressed in the automatic way of someone whose wardrobe operated independently of their emotional state, but her eyes were stripped of performance, no calculation in them, no careful composure. Just a woman carrying something too heavy to hold alone anymore. She stopped on the other side of the table. I won't sit down, she said. I won't take long. Take whatever you need, Nadia said. Celeste looked at her, really looked, in the way people do when they are trying to reconcile the human being in front of them with the idea they have been carrying. Whatever she saw seemed to steady her slightly. I came because Raymond called me this morning, she said, after his partners froze the accounts. He wasn't, she paused, choosing her words carefully. He wasn't the person I thought I knew. No, Nadia said simply. He wasn't. Something moved across Celeste's face. Not guilt exactly. Something older and more complicated than guilt. I knew about the shell companies, she said. I want to be honest about that. I knew what we were doing was structured to protect assets in the event of a separation. He told me it was a precaution, that the marriage had been over for years. She stopped. He told me you knew, that you had an arrangement. The room absorbed that quietly. Gloria's pen moved once across her notepad. And the Instagram message? Nadia asked. Was that a precaution too? Celeste closed her eyes briefly. That was fear. I found out 3 days ago that the accounts weren't just that, it wasn't just about the marriage, that there were funds from the firm, that his partners were involved without knowing. She opened her eyes. I signed documents. Mrs. Ashford. My name is on things I didn't fully understand when I signed them. But you understand them now, Gloria said. Yes. Gloria leaned forward slightly. And you came here because Raymond called me this morning and told me to disappear. Celeste's voice fractured on the last word just slightly. Just enough. He said if I cooperated with anyone, he would make sure every document pointed to me as the architect. He has the resources to do that. I know he does. The room went still. Nadia looked at this woman, this stranger who had inhabited the shadow side of her marriage for God knows how long, and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition. The particular recognition of someone who understood what it felt like to be inside Raymond Ashford's orbit and slowly realized the ground was not where he had told you it was. Do you have copies of what you signed? Gloria asked. I have everything, Celeste said, on a drive. I brought it. She placed a small USB drive on the table between them. Gloria looked at it, then at Nadia. Nadia looked at Celeste, at the exhaustion in her face, at the drive on the table, at this strange broken morning that had led three women into a room together because one man had believed he was too powerful to be held accountable by any of them. Sit down, Celeste, Nadia said. Celeste sat, and for the next 40 minutes, the last walls of Raymond Ashford's empire came down, not with noise, not with drama, but with the quiet, devastating precision of three women in a room, telling the truth. Downstairs, in the building lobby, Nadia's phone lit up on the table with a call from Raymond's number. It rang 7 times. Nobody answered. Chapter 9: What She Kept and What She Let Burn. 6 weeks later, Atlanta was deep in November. The trees along Peachtree Street had gone amber and copper, shedding themselves with a kind of dignity that Nadia found unexpectedly beautiful. She had always rushed through autumn before, too busy maintaining the performance of a life she had outgrown to notice the city doing something honest. She noticed it now. She was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from her new apartment, a clean, light-filled space in Inman Park that she had chosen entirely alone, without consulting anyone about the neighborhood or the lease or whether the kitchen was big enough for 2. It was big enough for her. That was the only measurement that mattered now. Her laptop was open. Design files spread across the screen. She had taken on 3 new clients in the past month, work she had quietly scaled back during the marriage because Raymond had preferred her available, preferred her ambient, preferred her in the background of his life like a well-chosen piece of furniture. She was not furniture. She knew that now in a way that lived in her bones rather than just her mind. Gloria had called yesterday with the final update. Raymond Ashford had accepted a settlement agreement 3 days before. The case was scheduled to go before a judge. The terms were precise and unambiguous. Nadia received her full share of the marital assets, including the Buckhead property, which a Georgia court had swiftly unwound from Raymond's fraudulent trust. The forensic accounting report had been handed to federal investigators. The firm's partners had retained their own counsel and were pursuing Raymond separately for the diverted funds. Marcus Hale, the man Raymond had once called a coward dressed in consultant's clothes, had been the first partner to cooperate fully with investigators. Raymond's attorney had tried in the final weeks to negotiate a narrative, to shape the story into something more forgiving, to suggest that mistakes had been made on all sides, that context mattered, that a man of Raymond's standing deserved the consideration of complexity. Gloria had handed that attorney a 47-page forensic report and told him complexity was well documented. As for Celeste, she had cooperated completely with investigators. Her own legal exposure was reduced significantly in exchange for her testimony and the contents of that USB drive. Nadia did not feel warmly toward her, but she did not feel the hot, consuming anger she might have expected either. Celeste had been a chapter in Raymond's story of deception, not the cause of it. The cause had been Raymond himself, and a world that had rewarded his particular brand of charm and ruthlessness long enough for him to believe he had become untouchable. He had not been untouchable. He had simply not yet met the version of Nadia that existed. On the other side of that Tuesday afternoon in his office, her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her sister, Rennie, who had cried for 40 minutes when Nadia finally told her everything, not from sadness, but from the specific relief of someone who had been worried for years and had never known how to say it. Dinner Sunday. I'm making mom's jollof. Non-negotiable. Nadia smiled. A real one. The kind that reached everything. She typed back, I'll bring the wine. She set the phone down and looked out the window at the street. A woman walked past pushing a stroller, laughing at something on her phone. Two men argued cheerfully over a parking space. A child pressed her face against the glass of the bakery next door, breath fogging the window. Ordinary life. Going about its business. She had missed ordinary life. For 6 years she had lived inside a controlled environment, temperature regulated, noise managed, exits monitored. She had called it a marriage. She understood now it had been something closer to an arrangement. She had slowly stopped questioning because questioning had consequences and silence had felt, for a time, like safety. Silence was not safety. She knew that too now. She turned back to her laptop, opened a new design file. The cursor blinked against the white space, patient, unhurried, full of possibility. Before she began, she allowed herself one final thought of Raymond. Not with hatred, not with longing. With something quieter and more final than either of those things. She thought of him the way you think of a storm that has passed, acknowledging the damage it did, grateful for the stillness it left behind, no longer afraid of the sky. She had served him dinner. She had sat across the candlelight from a man who had been dismantling her life with both hands while smiling at her across the table. And then, quietly and completely, she had ended his reign. Not with rage, not with revenge, with truth, with patience, with the terrifying, unstoppable power of a woman who had finally decided that she was worth fighting for. She began to type. Outside, the amber leaves let go of the trees one by one, not falling, but choosing, and the city carried them somewhere new. If this story moved you, if you recognized something in Nadia's silence, her patience, or the moment she finally chose herself, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories about real strength, quiet courage, and the lives people rebuild from the inside out, subscribe, because the next story is already waiting.